The bullet whistled past Fletcher Xavier's ear so close he could feel the heat of it against his skin, and he knew with absolute certainty that his luck had finally run out in the unforgiving Arizona desert. Fletcher had been riding hard for 3 days straight, chasing rumors of work at a cattle ranch near Yuma, when his horse had gone lame 20 miles outside of Deming, New Mexico. He had walked through the scorching heat, rationing what little water remained in his canteen, his boots raising clouds of pale dust with every step. The sun beat down mercilessly on the parched landscape, turning the air into something thick and suffocating. By the second day of walking, his lips had cracked and bled, his tongue felt swollen in his mouth, and strange visions danced at the edges of his sight. That was when he had stumbled upon the abandoned stagecoach, its wheels half buried in sand, the horses long gone. Fletcher had searched through the wreckage hoping for water or supplies, but found only a locked strongbox that he knew better than to touch. Still, desperation made fools of honest men, and he had been kneeling beside it, contemplating whether he could pry it open when the first shot rang out. Now he was running, or trying to, his legs weak from dehydration and exhaustion. Another shot kicked up dirt at his feet. Fletcher dove behind a cluster of rocks, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was unarmed, having sold his revolver 2 weeks ago to pay for lodging and a hot meal. It had seemed like a reasonable decision at the time. Now it felt like the height of stupidity. "Come out where I can see you," a voice called. It was distinctly feminine, which surprised Fletcher more than being shot at. Women were not uncommon in the territories, but female gunfighters were rare enough to be noteworthy. Fletcher pressed his back against the sun-heated stone, trying to catch his breath. "I was not taking anything," he shouted back, his voice hoarse from thirst. "Just looking for water. Liar. I have been tracking you since you left your horse behind. You are heading straight for the border, same as every other thief who knocks over a stage." Fletcher closed his eyes, understanding washing over him with grim clarity. She thought he was the one who had robbed the stagecoach. Of course she did. What were the odds that an innocent man would stumble upon the exact same abandoned stage? "Listen to me," he called out, keeping his hands visible as he slowly stood. "I am just a cowboy looking for work. My horse went lame days ago. I have been walking ever since. I found that stage by accident, I swear it." He could see her now, approaching with her rifle raised. She was perhaps 23 or 24, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, wearing men's trousers and a dust-covered shirt. Her face was beautiful in a sharp, striking way, all angles and determination, with unusual gray-green eyes that fixed on him with unwavering suspicion. A tin star glinted on her chest, though it looked unofficial, the kind bounty hunters and private security wore. "Drop to your knees," she ordered, and Fletcher complied without argument. His vision swam dangerously, black spots dancing before his eyes. The world tilted sideways and he felt himself falling before he could stop it. He awoke to the sensation of water trickling against his lips. Fletcher's eyes flew open and he gulped desperately, his hands coming up to grasp the canteen being held to his mouth. "Slowly," the woman said, her voice gentler now but still wary. "You will make yourself sick." Fletcher forced himself to obey, taking small sips even though every instinct screamed at him to drain the container. The water was warm and tasted of metal, but it was the finest thing he had ever experienced. As his senses returned, he realized he was lying in the shade of a rocky outcropping, his head resting on what felt like a saddle blanket. The woman sat a few feet away, her rifle across her lap, watching him with those peculiar eyes. "Thank you," Fletcher managed, his voice still rough. "You could have left me out there. I still might, depending on your answers. She tilted her head, studying him. What is your name? Fletcher Xavier. I have been working ranches from Montana down to Texas for the past 6 years. I can give you names, people who will vouch for me. And you just happened to stumble across that stagecoach. Yes, madam. I swear on anything you want me to swear on. Fletcher pushed himself up to a sitting position slowly, not wanting to alarm her. What is in that strongbox anyway? $15,000 in banknotes and gold, being transported from the Deeming Bank to Yuma. The stage was hit 4 days ago, driver and guard killed. Her expression remained neutral, but Fletcher saw the flash of something harder in her eyes. Anger, maybe, or grief. The man who did it is named Silas Greer. He has robbed 6 stages in the past year, killed 11 people. Fletcher let out a long breath. And you are hunting him. I am. She set the canteen aside but kept the rifle ready. My name is Fiona Kirby. My father was the guard on that stage. Silas Greer shot him in the back while he was trying to surrender. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Fletcher understood now the intensity in her gaze, the tight control in her voice. This was not just business for her. This was personal. I am sorry, Fletcher said, and meant it. That is a hard thing to carry. Fiona's jaw tightened. I do not need your sympathy. I need to find Greer before he makes it across the border into Mexico. Once he is there, he is gone for good. She stood abruptly, slinging the rifle over her shoulder. Can you ride? If there is a horse available, yes, madam. I have 2. Greer's horse threw him yesterday, and I picked it up. Lucky for you. She paused, looking down at him with an expression he could not quite read. I am choosing to believe your story, Fletcher Xavier. But if I find out you are lying to me, or if you try anything foolish, I will put a bullet in you without hesitation. Understood. Understood. Good. We ride in 10 minutes. Greer has maybe a day's lead on us, but he is on foot now, same as you were. We can catch him if we move fast. Fletcher struggled to his feet, his legs still unsteady. Why would I help you hunt an outlaw? Fiona had already started walking toward where the horses were tethered, but she glanced back over her shoulder. Because the alternative is I leave you here in the desert with no water and no horse. Also, because you look like the kind of man who does the right thing when given the chance. Am I wrong? She was not wrong, which frustrated Fletcher more than he cared to admit. He had been taught from childhood to respect the law and help those in need, lessons from his mother that had stuck with him even after her death. Besides, no man deserved to die in the desert alone, and Fiona Kirby was offering him a way out of this wasteland. No, madam, he said quietly. You are not wrong. They rode through the afternoon and into the evening, following tracks that Fiona read with practiced ease. Fletcher had done his share of tracking over the years, but he was impressed by her skill. She noticed things he would have missed. A displaced stone here, a broken piece of sage there, the slight scuff marks that indicated someone stumbling in exhaustion. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple, Fiona called a halt near a dry wash. We camp here, she announced, dismounting in one fluid motion. No fire. Greer might see it. Fletcher slid from his borrowed horse, every muscle aching. How long have you been tracking him? Since the day after the robbery. I was in Deeming visiting my father when it happened. Fiona began unsaddling her horse with efficient movements. The sheriff said it was too dangerous for a woman to go after Greer, said I should let the law handle it, but you came anyway. My father was the only family I had left. My mother died when I was 16. I have been working as a scout and guide for the past few years, so I know this territory better than any lawman in 3 counties. She fixed Fletcher with a level stare. I can take care of myself. I do not doubt that, Miss Kirby. You have proven as much already. Something in his tone made her pause. For the first time since they had met, her expression softened slightly. "Call me Fiona. We are not in a parlor room. Then you should call me Fletcher." They worked in companionable silence, setting up a basic camp. Fiona had enough supplies for two, including dried beef and hardtack that tasted like eating leather, but Fletcher was grateful for it nonetheless. As they ate, sitting on opposite sides of where a fire would have been, he studied her in the fading light. There was something remarkable about Fiona Kirby beyond her unconventional occupation and striking looks. She moved with absolute confidence, every gesture purposeful and controlled. Yet beneath that hard exterior, Fletcher sensed a deep well of pain. He recognized it because he carried his own share of sorrows. "What brought you out to Deeming?" Fiona asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "Looking for ranch work. I heard the Triple Bar near Yuma was hiring hands for the fall drive. Long way to come for uncertain work." Fletcher shrugged. "I have been drifting since my father died 3 years ago. He had a small spread up in Wyoming, but the bank took it after a bad winter killed most of the herd. I sold what was left and have been moving ever since. No interest in settling down. I have not found a reason to yet." The words came out more honestly than he intended. Fletcher had not really examined why he kept moving, always taking short-term work, never staying in one place long enough to form real connections. It was easier somehow, not having roots, less painful when it was time to move on. Fiona nodded slowly, as if she understood. "My father used to say that some people are born with wandering feet and settling hearts. They just need to find the right place or the right person to feel at home." Sounds like a wise man. He was. Her voice caught slightly on the words, and she turned her face away, looking out at the darkening desert. "He taught me everything I know about tracking, shooting, surviving out here. He wanted me to be able to take care of myself no matter what happened. He succeeded." Fiona was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I keep thinking that if I had been there, if I had been on that stage instead of visiting the dress shop in town, I could have stopped it. I could have saved him." "Or you would be dead too," Fletcher said gently. "You cannot blame yourself for surviving." "I am not sure I did survive, not the part that matters." She stood abruptly, grabbing her rifle. "I will take first watch. You should sleep." Fletcher wanted to say something more, to offer some comfort, but he sensed that Fiona was not ready to hear it. So he simply nodded and rolled himself into his blanket, using his saddle as a pillow. Despite his exhaustion, sleep was slow to come. He kept thinking about the woman sitting watch a few yards away, alone with her grief and her mission of vengeance. They rose before dawn, eating quickly and riding out as soon as there was enough light to follow the tracks. The trail led them deeper into increasingly rugged terrain, all rocky hills and steep washes that would be deadly flash flood channels during the rainy season. The temperature climbed steadily as the sun rose, and Fletcher was grateful for the extra water Fiona had given him. Around midday, Fiona suddenly held up her hand, bringing her horse to a halt. Fletcher stopped beside her, following her gaze to a spot perhaps 100 yards ahead where a figure sat slumped against a large boulder. "Is that him?" Fletcher asked quietly. Fiona had pulled out a small brass telescope and was peering through it. "Yes, looks like he finally collapsed. Could be a trap, though." She collapsed the telescope and handed it to Fletcher. "Stay here with the horses. If anything happens to me, ride back to Deeming and tell the sheriff." "Absolutely not. If it is a trap, you will need backup. You are unarmed and untrained." "I have been in my share of fights, and I am a decent shot when I have a gun. Give me your pistol." Fiona turned to look at him, clearly weighing the options. Finally, she pulled her revolver from its holster and handed it over. Do not make me regret this. I will do my best. They approached carefully, Fletcher hanging back slightly with the pistol ready while Fiona kept her rifle trained on the slumped figure. As they drew closer, Fletcher could see that the man was in bad shape. His lips were cracked and bleeding, his face burned raw by the sun, and he was barely conscious. "Silas Greer," Fiona said, her voice hard as iron. The man's eyes fluttered open. He was perhaps 40, with a face that might have been handsome before it had been carved into hard lines by violence and desert sun. When he saw Fiona, something like recognition flickered in his expression. "You are Kirby's girl," he rasped. "Should have known you would come after me." "Where is the strong box?" Greer laughed, which turned into a coughing fit. "Gone, buried, you will never find it." His eyes shifted to Fletcher. "Who is this, your sweetheart?" "Where is the strong box?" Fiona repeated, moving closer. "Shoot me or give me water, lady, those are your options." "I am not telling you anything." Fiona stared down at him for a long moment, her finger resting on the trigger. Fletcher could see the war playing out behind her eyes, the desire for vengeance battling against something else, something better. "Fiona," Fletcher said quietly, "this is not what your father would want. You did not know my father." "No, but I know he raised you to be better than this. If you kill him now like this, you are no different than he is. He killed 11 people, and he will hang for it. But that is for the law to decide, not you." Fletcher took a careful step closer. "You said your father taught you to survive out here, but survival is not the same thing as living. Do not let this man take any more from you than he already has." Fiona's hands were shaking now, the rifle barrel wavering slightly. A tear rolled down her cheek, cutting a clean line through the dust on her face. "He killed my father, shot him in the back like a coward. I know, and nothing I say will make that right. But killing him now, when he cannot even defend himself, will not bring your father back. It will only poison whatever is good left inside you." The silence stretched out, broken only by Greer's labored breathing. Finally, with a sound that was half sob, half growl, Fiona lowered the rifle. "You should have killed me," Greer said with a twisted smile. Without a word, Fiona swung the rifle butt around and cracked him across the jaw. The outlaw's head snapped back and he slumped completely, unconscious. "I am not that merciful," Fiona said flatly. She turned to Fletcher, her eyes red but fierce. "Help me tie him up. We are taking him back to Deeming." It took them 2 days to make the return journey, hampered by Greer's condition and the need to stop frequently for water. The outlaw remained largely silent, speaking only to give cryptic hints about where he had buried the strongbox. Fiona ignored him completely, her face set in hard lines. Fletcher found himself riding beside her, and despite the circumstances, he enjoyed her company. She was unlike any woman he had ever known, tough, capable, and fiercely intelligent. She knew the desert the way some people knew city streets, raiding the land with an intimacy that came from years of experience. On the second night, after they had secured Greer and set up camp, Fletcher found Fiona sitting apart from the group, staring up at the stars. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She shrugged, which he took as permission. Fletcher sat down on the sand beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Thank you," Fiona said suddenly, "for stopping me yesterday. You were right. If I had killed him like that, it would have destroyed me. You would have figured it out on your own. You are too good a person to live with that kind of choice. You do not know me well enough to say that. Maybe not. But I know enough." Fletcher looked up at the stars, the same stars that had guided him across a dozen territories. "I have met a lot of people in my travels, Fiona. Some good, some bad, most somewhere in between. You are one of the good ones, I can tell." Fiona turned to look at him, and in the starlight her eyes were luminous. "What will you do after we get back to Deeming? Still heading to Yuma?" Fletcher considered the question. The truth was, he had barely thought about the Triple Bar Ranch since joining Fiona on this hunt. The prospect of drifting on to another temporary job suddenly felt hollow and pointless. "I am not sure anymore," he admitted. "Maybe it is time I stopped running and found a reason to stay somewhere." "And what reason would that be?" Fletcher met her gaze steadily. "I think I might have just found it." The air between them seemed to shimmer with something unspoken. Fiona's breath caught, and for a moment Fletcher thought she might lean toward him. But then she looked away, her expression closing off. "You do not know what you are saying. We have known each other for 3 days. Long enough to know that I have never met anyone like you. Long enough to want more time to see where this goes." Fletcher kept his voice gentle but certain. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow, Fiona. I am just saying that I would like to stay in Deeming a while, get to know you better, see if what I am feeling might be mutual." "And what are you feeling?" "Like I have been walking through a desert my whole life, and you are the first water I have found." Fiona let out a shaky laugh. "That is quite a line, Fletcher Xavier." "It is not a line, it is the truth." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently took her hand. Her fingers were calloused and strong, but they trembled slightly in his grip. "I know the timing is terrible. I know you are grieving and dealing with a lot. But I also know that life is short and unpredictable, and when you find something worth holding on to, you should not let it slip away." Fiona looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. "My father used to say that the heart knows things the mind cannot understand. That sometimes you meet someone and just know they are important, even if you cannot explain why." "Sounds like a wise man," Fletcher said again, echoing his earlier words. He really was. Fiona's eyes filled with tears again, but she did not pull away. "I miss him so much, Fletcher. Every day feels like I am carrying this enormous weight, and I do not know how to put it down." "Maybe you are not supposed to put it down. Maybe you are supposed to find someone willing to help you carry it." That did it. Fiona turned fully toward him, tears streaming down her face, and Fletcher pulled her into his arms. She cried against his chest, great shuddering sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. Fletcher held her, one hand stroking her hair, whispering soft reassurances. He understood grief. He knew there was no fixing it, no magic words that would make it better. All you could do was be present, be steady, and let the storm pass through. When Fiona finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her eyes were swollen, but she looked somehow lighter. "I am sorry," she said, wiping at her cheeks. "I have been holding that in for too long. Nothing to apologize for. Grief needs to come out somehow, or it poisons you from the inside." Fiona studied him with new eyes, as if really seeing him for the first time. "You have lost people too." "Both parents. My mother when I was 19, my father 3 years ago. I know it is not the same as what you are going through, but I understand the shape of it." "Does it get easier?" Fletcher considered lying, offering false comfort, but Fiona deserved honesty. "Not easier exactly, but different. The sharp edges dull over time. You learn to carry it better, and eventually you can remember the good times without it hurting quite so much." Fiona nodded slowly, then surprised him by leaning her head against his shoulder. They sat like that for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead, neither of them speaking. It was enough to simply be together, sharing the quiet and the darkness. When they finally returned to their bedrolls, Fletcher felt something had shifted between them. Some invisible barrier had come down, allowing a connection he had never experienced before. As he drifted off to sleep, his last thought was that maybe, just maybe, his wandering days were finally coming to an end. They rode into Deeming late the following afternoon, dusty and exhausted but successful. The town was typical for the New Mexico Territory in 1885. A main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a few side streets with houses and smaller businesses, and the ever-present smell of horses and dust. News of their arrival spread quickly, and by the time they reached the sheriff's office, a small crowd had gathered. Sheriff Tom Morrison came out to meet them, a grizzled man in his 50s with sharp blue eyes. He looked at Greer tied to his horse, then at Fiona with something like grudging respect. "I will be damned, you actually caught him." "I had help," Fiona said, dismounting. She gestured to Fletcher. "This is Fletcher Xavier. He was with me when we found Greer out in the desert." Morrison shook Fletcher's hand with a firm grip. "The town owes you both a debt. Greer has been a plague on these territories for too long." He turned to his deputy. "Get that scum into a cell. Make sure he is locked up tight." As the deputy hauled Greer away, the outlaw caught Fiona's eye. "You will never find that money," he called out. "I will die before I tell you where it is." "Then you will die," Fiona said coldly. "Either way, you are done hurting people." The crowd dispersed slowly, people stopping to congratulate Fiona and ask questions about the capture. Fletcher hung back, suddenly uncertain of his place in all this. He was an outsider here, a drifter who had stumbled into someone else's story. Now that the hunt was over, he was not sure where he fit. Fiona must have sensed his thoughts because she turned and caught his eye. She excused herself from the conversation she was having and walked over to him, her expression serious. "Are you leaving?" she asked quietly. "You want me to stay?" "I do not know. This is all happening very fast, Fletcher. 3 days ago we were strangers. Now you are talking about settling down here, and I am feeling things I have not felt in years, and I am not sure if it is real or if it is just because of everything that has happened." Fletcher nodded slowly. He understood her hesitation, even if it stung a little. "Tell you what. I will get a room at the hotel for a week. Take some time to figure out my next move. If you want to see me, you know where I am. If you decide this was just the circumstances talking, I will understand and move on. No hard feelings." "A week," Fiona repeated. "A week. That is fair, is it not?" She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her entire face. "That is fair." Fletcher checked into the Desert Rose Hotel, a modest establishment that was nevertheless clean and comfortable. The proprietor, a friendly widow named Mrs. Chen, took his money and gave him a room on the second floor with a window overlooking the main street. After days in the desert, the simple luxury of a real bed and a bath felt like heaven. He spent the first evening cleaning up and buying some new clothes, his old ones having been destroyed by the desert journey. The general store owner, a talkative man named Henry, filled him in on local gossip while measuring him for 2 new shirts and a pair of sturdy work pants. "Heard you helped Fiona Kirby bring in Silas Greer," Henry said as he worked. "That is quite a feat. Most folks did not think she would make it back alive, tracking a killer like that. Most folks underestimated her. That they did. Fiona has always been different from other women around here. Her father encouraged it, teaching her to shoot and track instead of sewing and cooking. Some people thought he was doing her a disservice, but I always figured he was just giving her the tools to survive." Henry paused in his work, his expression growing somber. His death hit her hard. "She has not been quite the same since. Grief changes people," Fletcher said quietly. "That it does, but maybe having someone like you around will help her heal." Henry gave him a meaningful look. "You planning on staying in Deeming, thinking about it? Good. We could use more decent men around here. Too many drifters and troublemakers these days." Henry finished his measurements and moved to the fabric selection. "These should be ready in 2 days. You need anything else?" "Actually, I am looking for work. Know of anyone hiring?" Henry considered this. "The Copper Queen mine is always looking for workers, but that is hard, dangerous labor." Not much in the way of ranch work right now, but you might talk to Jack Sullivan over at the livery. He mentioned needing help with the horses. Fletcher thanked him and headed to the livery stable, a large structure at the edge of town. Jack Sullivan turned out to be a barrel-chested man with an easy laugh and kind eyes. After a brief conversation and a demonstration of Fletcher's skills with horses, Jack offered him a job starting the next day. Pay is not much, Jack warned. $1 a day plus meals, but it is honest work and I will not work you to death. Sounds perfect, Fletcher said, shaking his hand. As he walked back to the hotel, Fletcher felt a sense of rightness settle over him. For the first time in 3 years, he was not just passing through. He was putting down roots, or at least considering it seriously. The thought should have scared him, but instead it felt like relief. He saw Fiona the next morning. She was walking down the main street carrying a basket, probably returning from the market. She stopped when she saw him, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then she smiled and walked over. "I heard you found work at the livery," she said. News travels fast in a small town. It does. Fiona adjusted the basket on her hip. "I was thinking if you are not busy tonight, maybe you would like to have dinner. I am not much of a cook, but I can manage something edible." Fletcher's heart lifted. "I would like that very much." 6 o'clock. "I live in the small yellow house on Cedar Street, 2 blocks east of here. I will be there." Fiona nodded, looking suddenly shy. It was a striking contrast to the fierce woman who had held a rifle on him just days ago. "Good. I will see you then." Fletcher watched her walk away, feeling like he had just won something precious. He went to work at the livery with a spring in his step, and even the hard labor of mucking stalls and exercising horses could not dampen his mood. Jack noticed and teased him good-naturedly. "Got a lady friend already, do you, maybe? Still figuring it out? Well, take your time. Love is not something to rush into, but it is also not something to walk away from." Jack paused in his work, leaning on his pitchfork. "My wife and I knew each other 3 days before I proposed. Everyone said we were crazy, that it would never last. We have been married 32 years now, and I love her more every day. Sometimes you just know, you know." Fletcher thought about Fiona, about the way she had cried in his arms under the stars, about the strength and vulnerability he saw in her eyes. "Yeah," he said softly. "Sometimes you just know." The day passed quickly, and Fletcher found himself cleaning up early, wanting to look his best. He changed into one of his new shirts, combed his hair, and even bought a small bouquet of wildflowers from a girl selling them on the street corner. Cedar Street was quiet in the evening light, and the yellow house was easy to find. It was small but well-maintained, with a tiny garden out front that showed signs of careful tending. Fletcher knocked on the door, his heart beating faster than it had any right to. Fiona opened the door, and Fletcher nearly forgot how to breathe. She had changed out of her usual practical clothing into a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes. Her hair was down, falling in dark waves around her shoulders. She looked beautiful and slightly nervous. "You brought flowers," she said, taking the bouquet with a smile. "Thank you. Come in." The interior of the house was cozy and lived in, with simple furniture and personal touches that spoke of a life built over time. Photographs lined the mantel above a small fireplace, and Fletcher recognized a younger Fiona standing beside a tall man with kind eyes. "That is my father," Fiona said softly, following his gaze. "That was taken about 5 years ago, right after he helped me buy this house. You look happy." "I was. He was so proud of me for saving up enough to afford my own place." She set the flowers in a vase on the table, which was already set for 2. "I hope you like stew. It is about the only thing I can make reliably." "Stew sounds wonderful." They sat down to eat, and Fletcher had to admit the stew was good. thick with meat and vegetables, seasoned well and served with fresh bread. As they ate, they talked about small things at first, getting to know each other in the normal way people did when they were not fleeing through the desert or hunting outlaws. Fletcher learned that Fiona had been born in Texas, but moved to New Mexico when she was 12, after her mother's death. Her father had worked various jobs, eventually becoming a guard for the stage line. She had learned tracking and shooting from him, but also from the various scouts and frontiersmen who passed through the territory. She had been working as a guide for survey teams and sometimes hunters for the past 4 years, making a decent living at it. "Most men do not like taking orders from a woman," she said, her tone matter of fact. "But once they see I know what I am doing, they usually come around. And if they do not, I refuse to work with them. Life is too short to deal with that kind of foolishness." "What will you do now?" Fletcher asked. "With the guiding work, I mean." Fiona was quiet for a moment, pushing food around on her plate. "I am not sure. The past few weeks, all I could think about was catching Greer. Now that it is done, I feel sort of empty, like I do not know what comes next. Maybe that is a good thing. It means you can choose anything. Maybe." She looked up at him, her expression vulnerable. "What about you, Fletcher? Are you really thinking about staying here, or were you just being kind out in the desert?" Fletcher set down his fork and met her eyes steadily. "I meant every word. Fiona, I have been drifting for 3 years, never staying anywhere longer than a season. I told myself I was looking for the right place, but the truth is I was running. Running from grief, from responsibility, from the possibility of losing anyone else I cared about. And now I think maybe I have been running toward something instead of away from it. Toward this place, this moment, you." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other, but I have never felt this kind of certainty about anything before. I want to stay, Fiona. I want to see where this goes, but only if you want that too." Fiona's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I am scared," she whispered. "I have lost so many people. My mother, my father. What if I let myself care about you and then something happens? Something might happen. We cannot control that. But would you rather live your whole life afraid of loss, never letting anyone in? That is not living, Fiona. That is just existing. I know you are right. I just do not know if I am brave enough. You tracked a killer through the desert alone. You faced down the man who murdered your father. You are one of the bravest people I have ever met." Fletcher squeezed her hand gently. "Being scared of losing someone you care about is not weakness. It is being human, but we cannot let that fear stop us from living." Fiona was quiet for a long time, her thumb tracing small circles on the back of his hand. Finally, she looked up at him, her expression full of determination and hope and fear all mixed together. "Okay," she said simply. "Let us see where this goes." Fletcher felt something unlock in his chest, a tightness he had not even known he was carrying. Yeah, Fiona smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "But we take it slow, get to know each other properly, no rushing into anything. Slow is good, slow is perfect." They finished dinner and moved to the small sitting area, talking late into the night. Fletcher told her about growing up in Wyoming, about his mother who had been a school teacher and his father who had loved the land, even when it broke his heart. Fiona shared more about her childhood, about the time her father had taught her to track by following a lost kitten for 3 days until they found it, about her mother's laugh and how much she still missed it after all these years. When Fletcher finally left, well past midnight, he kissed Fiona on the cheek at her doorstep. It was chaste and respectful, but the promise of more hung in the air between them. The next weeks fell into a comfortable pattern. Fletcher worked at the livery during the day, learning the business and proving himself reliable. Jack Sullivan was a good employer and better friend, often inviting Fletcher to join him and his wife for Sunday dinner. Through them, Fletcher was introduced to more of the community, slowly building connections that transformed Deeming from a place he was staying into a place he belonged. His evenings were spent with Fiona. Sometimes they had dinner at her house. Other times they walked through town or out into the desert, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. She taught him to read tracks better, to see the subtle signs that revealed stories in the sand. He taught her card games his mother had taught him, and they spent cozy evenings playing poker for matchsticks and laughing at each other's terrible bluffs. They learned each other slowly, carefully, building something solid and real. Fletcher discovered that Fiona was funny, with a dry wit that caught him off guard. She could be stubborn to the point of infuriating, but she was also fiercely loyal and protective of those she cared about. She sang off-key when she was happy and got a small crinkle between her eyebrows when she was concentrating. Fiona learned that Fletcher was patient and thoughtful, always considering his words before speaking. He had a gift with animals, a gentleness that made even the most skittish horses calm under his hands. He was terrible at cooking but excellent at cleaning, and he had a habit of whistling old folk songs while he worked. He took his coffee black and could not stand anything too spicy, despite having lived in Texas for 2 years. About a month after Fletcher's arrival in Deeming, Sheriff Morrison came to visit Fiona at her house. Fletcher was there, helping her repair a broken fence in her small yard. They both looked up as Morrison dismounted, his expression grave. "Evening, Fiona, Fletcher," Morrison said, tipping his hat. "Got some news about Silas Greer." Fiona set down her hammer. "What kind of news?" "He is being transported to Santa Fe for trial next week. Judge wanted me to let you know, seeing as how you are the one who brought him in. Thought you might want to testify." Fiona's face had gone pale. "I see. There is more." Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "Before the transport, I offered Greer a deal. Reduce his sentence from hanging to life imprisonment if he told us where the strongbox was buried. He took it." "He told you where the money is?" Fletcher asked. "He did. We dug it up yesterday. Every dollar accounted for." Morrison pulled an envelope from his pocket. "The bank is offering a $5,000 reward for the recovery of the funds. That is yours, Fiona. You earned it." Fiona stared at the envelope like it was a snake. "I did not do it for the money. I know. But it is yours all the same. And before you argue, remember that this money could help you build a real business. Start a proper tracking and guide service. Maybe hire some help." Morrison glanced meaningfully at Fletcher. "Settle down if you wanted to." After Morrison left, Fiona sat on her front step, the envelope still unopened in her hands. Fletcher sat beside her, not saying anything, just being present. $5,000, Fiona finally said. "That is more money than I have seen in my entire life. It is a fortune. I could do a lot with that much money. Buy better equipment, maybe even buy a small ranch, raise horses or cattle." She looked at Fletcher. "What do you think I should do?" "What do you want to do?" Fiona was quiet for a long time. "I want to build something," she said finally. "Something permanent, something my father would be proud of, but I do not want to do it alone." Fletcher's heart started beating faster. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that maybe it is time to stop thinking about this as your life and my life, and start thinking about it as our life." Fiona turned to face him fully. "I love you, Fletcher. I think I have loved you since you stopped me from killing Greer, maybe even before that, and I am tired of being scared of what that means." Fletcher felt like his chest might burst. "I love you too. Have since the moment you gave me water in the desert instead of leaving me to die. Maybe even before that, when you first held that rifle on me and I saw the fire in your eyes." They kissed then, Not the chaste touches they had shared before, but deeply and passionately, pouring weeks of restrained feelings into that single moment. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, their foreheads resting together. "Marry me," Fletcher said, the words coming out before he could think about them. "I know it has only been a month, and I know people will say we are crazy, but I do not care. Marry me, Fiona. Let me spend the rest of my life loving you." Fiona laughed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes. Yes. Absolutely yes." They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the local church, with half the town in attendance. Jack Sullivan stood as Fletcher's best man, and Mrs. Chen served as Fiona's witness. It was simple and perfect, exactly what they both wanted. Using the reward money, they bought a small ranch about 5 miles outside of Deeming. It had good water, decent grazing land, and a sturdy house that needed work but had good bones. Fletcher continued working at the livery, saving money to buy their first horses, while Fiona took on occasional guiding jobs, building their nest egg. Life was not always easy. There were hard days and disagreements and times when the desert heat or the winter cold made them question their choices. But they faced it all together, supporting each other through the challenges and celebrating the victories. Their first son was born in the spring of 1887, squalling and healthy and absolutely perfect. They named him Thomas, after Fiona's father. Fletcher had never known love could expand the way it did when he held his son for the first time, looking at Fiona exhausted and radiant in their bed. "He has your eyes," Fletcher said softly, touching the baby's tiny hand. "And your stubborn chin," Fiona replied with a tired smile. "Poor child does not stand a chance." Thomas was followed by a daughter 2 years later, Catherine, who had Fiona's dark hair and Fletcher's easy temperament. Their family grew, and so did their ranch. Fletcher proved to have a gift for breeding horses, producing animals that were both hardy and intelligent. Fiona's reputation as a guide continued to grow, and eventually she was training others in the art of tracking and desert survival. They prospered, not in the sense of becoming wealthy, but in building a life rich with purpose and love. Fletcher still sometimes thought about those days in the desert, dying of thirst and believing his luck had finally run out. He thought about how Fiona had given him water, had spared his life when she could have left him there. But mostly he thought about how they had saved each other in all the ways that mattered. It was on their 5th anniversary that Fiona came to him with a strange expression on her face. They were sitting on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the desert, their children playing in the yard with a collection of kittens from their barn cat's latest litter. "I have been thinking about something," Fiona said. "About that day when we found Greer." "What about it?" "I never thanked you properly for what you said, for stopping me from doing something I would have regretted for the rest of my life." She took his hand, her grip strong and sure. "You saved me that day, Fletcher, not just from making a terrible mistake, but from the person I was becoming. I was so consumed by grief and anger that I was losing myself. You brought me back." Fletcher squeezed her hand. "You saved me first. I was dying in that desert, physically and spiritually. I had given up on finding anything worth staying for. Then you gave me water and a purpose, and eventually a reason to build a life instead of just surviving." "We saved each other," Fiona said softly. "We did. Do you ever wonder how different things would be if you had not found that stage coach, if I had not tracked you down?" Fletcher considered this. The odds of their meeting had been astronomical. If his horse had not gone lame in that exact spot, if he had turned left instead of right, if Fiona had given up tracking him one day earlier, their lives would have gone in completely different directions. "I think we were meant to find each other," he said finally. Maybe not in a magical destiny kind of way, but in the sense that we were both looking for something, even if we did not know what it was. And somehow, against all odds, we found it. Fiona leaned her head against his shoulder, watching their children play as the sky turned brilliant shades of orange and red. "You are the one I have been searching for," she whispered. "I did not know it until I found you, but you are." Fletcher remembered that first day, kneeling in the sand with a gun pointed at him, dying of thirst and seeing a fierce woman who would change his life forever. He remembered giving her water, sitting with her under the stars, stopping her from making a choice that would have destroyed her. He remembered falling in love in the middle of the desert, in the middle of grief and pain and uncertainty, and choosing to build something beautiful from it. "You are the one I have been searching for too," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And I will spend the rest of my life being grateful I found you." The years continued to pass, marked by the growth of their children and their ranch. Thomas grew tall and serious, with his mother's gift for reading the land and his father's patience with animals. Catherine was wild and joyful, unafraid of anything, charging into life with the kind of fearlessness that both terrified and delighted her parents. When Thomas was 12, he asked his father about how his parents had met. They were working together in the barn, grooming horses, when the question came. "Pa, did you really almost die in the desert?" Fletcher smiled, continuing to brush the mare's coat in long, smooth strokes. "I did. I was in pretty bad shape when your mother found me. And she thought you were a criminal," she did. "Had every reason to, really. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and she was hunting a dangerous man. But she gave me water anyway, saved my life even though she was not sure if I deserved it." Thomas was quiet for a moment, processing this. "Why did she do that? Save you, I mean." "I have thought about that a lot over the years. I think your mother knew even then that showing mercy was more important than satisfying anger. She could have left me there, could have killed the man she was hunting when we found him. But she chose to do what was right instead of what was easy." "Ma is pretty amazing," Thomas said with the simple honesty of childhood. "She really is. And do not ever let her hear you call her anything less, or we will both be in trouble." They laughed together, and Fletcher felt a wave of contentment wash over him. This was what he had been searching for all those years ago, even when he did not know it. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just surviving day to day. Fiona came into the barn then, Catherine trailing behind her, both of them covered in dust from riding. "There you are. I should have known you two would be hiding in here." "Not hiding, working," Fletcher corrected, but he was smiling. "Sure you are." Fiona came over and kissed him on the cheek, a casual gesture of affection that still made Fletcher's heart skip after all these years. "Dinner will be ready soon. Thomas, go wash up. Catherine, help me with the bread." As the children ran off, Fletcher caught Fiona's hand, pulling her back for a moment. "Have I told you today that I love you? Only 3 times. You are falling behind. Then let me catch up. I love you, Fiona Xavier. I love the life we have built together. I love our children and our home, and the fact that every day I get to wake up beside you." Fiona's expression softened, the way it always did when he said things like this. "I love you too, even when you leave your boots in the middle of the floor and forget to close the gate to the south pasture." "I closed that gate today, maybe. Yesterday, not so much." But she was smiling as she said it, and when she kissed him this time, it was long and deep and full of promise. Their life together was not a fairy tale. There were hard times. The year the drought nearly broke them, the winter Catherine caught pneumonia and they feared they would lose her. The day Thomas fell from a horse and broke his arm in 2 places. There were arguments about money and child rearing, and whose turn it was to fix the broken fence in the north pasture. But through it all, they had each other. They had built something solid and real, a partnership based on mutual respect and deep, abiding love. Fletcher never regretted his decision to stay in Deeming, to marry a woman he had known for only a few weeks. It had been the best decision of his life. As their children grew older and started their own families, Fletcher and Fiona had more time to themselves again. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, much as they had in the early days, watching the sun set over the desert and remembering. "You ever think about Silas Greer?" Fletcher asked one evening. They were both in their 50s now, their hair touched with gray but their love as strong as ever. Fiona considered the question. "Sometimes. I heard he died in prison about 5 years back, fought with another inmate and got stabbed." She was quiet for a moment. "I used to hate him so much. But now I mostly just feel sad. Sad for the people he killed, sad for the life he wasted, sad for the fact that he died alone and unmourned in a prison cell. Do you think you made the right choice, bringing him in instead of killing him? Every day. If I had killed him, I do not think I could have become the person I am now. I would have carried that weight forever, and it would have poisoned everything good in my life, including you." She reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "You gave me that, Fletcher. You gave me the chance to choose something better. You gave me everything," Fletcher said simply. "A home, a family, a reason to stop running. You gave me a life worth living." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. These were the same stars they had watched together that first night in the desert, when they were little more than strangers bound together by circumstance. Now they were husband and wife, partners in every sense of the word, bound together by years of love and struggle and joy. Fletcher thought about the young man he had been, dying of thirst in the desert, believing his luck had run out. If someone had told him then that the woman pointing a gun at his head would become the love of his life, he would have thought them crazy. But life had a funny way of working out sometimes, of taking your lowest moment and transforming it into something beautiful. "What are you thinking about?" Fiona asked, recognizing the distant look on his face. "About how lucky I am, how lucky we both are." "Luck had nothing to do with it. We chose this, Fletcher. Every day we choose each other, choose this life. That is not luck. That is love." Fletcher smiled, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing her knuckles gently. "You are right, as usual, though I maintain that I was lucky to find you in the first place. And I was lucky you were stubborn enough not to die in that desert, so I suppose we can call it even." They laughed together, the sound carrying across their land, a testament to everything they had built and survived. Their grandchildren would come tomorrow, 3 rambunctious boys from Thomas and a quiet girl from Catherine, and the house would be full of noise and chaos and love. But tonight it was just the two of them, as it had been in the beginning, as it would be until the end. "Fletcher," Fiona said softly. "Yeah, thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. Not just the hard edges and the anger, but the person underneath. For believing I could be more than my grief and my rage." Fiona's voice was thick with emotion. "For loving me enough to save me from myself." Fletcher pulled her closer, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "You saved yourself, Fiona. I just reminded you that you had a choice. Everything after that, everything we built together, that was all you. Well, you and me, together." "Together," Fiona echoed, settling against his chest with a contented sigh. They watched the stars together, these two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, who had built a life from the ashes of grief and the harsh reality of the desert. They had loved each other through good times and bad, had raised children and built a legacy that would outlast them both. And every day, Fletcher Xavier woke up grateful for the day his horse went lame in the desert, grateful for the fierce woman who had given him water when she had every reason not to, grateful for a love that had transformed both of their lives in ways neither could have imagined. He thought sometimes about that moment when Fiona had stood over Sela's Greer, her finger on the trigger, teetering on the edge of a choice that would have destroyed her. He thought about the words he had said, not even sure if they would make a difference, just knowing he had to try. And he thought about how one moment, one choice, one decision to show mercy instead of seeking revenge, had set them both on a path that led here, to this porch, to this life, to this love. "I love you," he whispered into Fiona's hair, breathing in the familiar scent of sage and sunshine that always clung to her. "I love you too," she murmured back, her voice drowsy and content. "Always have, always will." As the night deepened and the stars wheeled overhead, Fletcher closed his eyes and smiled. The desert that had nearly killed him had instead given him everything. And the woman who had saved his life with a gift of water had gone on to save him in every way a person could be saved. They had found each other in the wasteland, two lost souls searching for something they could not name. And together, they had created something beautiful, something lasting, something worth every struggle and hardship they had faced. The desert wind whispered across the land, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. And Fletcher Xavier, former drifter and now rancher, father, grandfather, and above all, husband to the woman he loved more than life itself, knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Years continued to roll by like tumbleweeds across the desert plains. The ranch prospered under Fletcher and Fiona's steady guidance, becoming known throughout the territory for producing some of the finest horses in New Mexico. Thomas took over more of the daily operations as Fletcher's back began to protest the hard physical labor, though Fletcher never fully retired, always finding some excuse to work with the animals he loved. Catherine married a teacher from town, a good man named Robert who treated her like the treasure she was, and they settled nearby, giving Fletcher and Fiona more grandchildren to spoil and love. Family dinners were loud, chaotic affairs with children running everywhere and laughter filling every corner of the house that Fletcher and Fiona had built together. On their 20th anniversary, Fletcher surprised Fiona with a trip back into the desert, to the place where they had first met. They rode out on a cool spring morning, taking their time, no longer the young people who could ride all day without complaint. But the land was still beautiful, still harsh and unforgiving, and somehow holy in its vastness. When they reached the spot where Fletcher had been dying of thirst all those years ago, they dismounted and stood together, looking out at the endless expanse of sand and rock. "I remember being so angry," Fiona said quietly, "so sure that you were the man I was hunting. I almost shot you. But you did not. You gave me water instead. I saw something in your eyes. Honesty, maybe, desperation, certainly, but something else too, something that made me hesitate." She turned to look at him, her eyes still that striking gray-green that had captured his heart so completely. "I am glad I hesitated. So am I." Fletcher pulled out a canteen from his saddlebag, the same one Fiona had used to give him water 20 years ago. She had kept it all these years, a memento of the day their lives changed forever. He held it up. "To second chances." Fiona smiled, touching the canteen gently. "To finding each other in the middle of nowhere. To building something beautiful from the wreckage of grief. To love that survives everything the desert can throw at it." They each took a drink, passing the canteen back and forth, and then Fletcher did something he had been planning for weeks. He dropped to one knee in the sand, pulling out a ring he had commissioned from the jeweler in Deeming. It was silver, set with a turquoise stone the exact color of the New Mexico sky. "Fletcher, what are you doing?" Fiona laughed, her eyes filling with tears. "We are already married, I know, but I never properly proposed. I just sort of blurted it out that day on your porch, remember? I have always regretted not doing it right, not making it special." He took her hand, looking up at her with all the love in his heart. "Fiona Kirby Xavier, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You are my partner, my best friend, the love of my life, and the mother of my children. You have given me 20 years of happiness I never thought I would find. Would you do me the honor of continuing to be my wife for whatever time we have left?" Fiona was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. "You ridiculous man. Of course I will. I will be your wife until the day I die and beyond, if such things are possible." Fletcher slipped the ring onto her finger, next to the simple gold band she had worn for 20 years, and stood, pulling her into his arms. They kissed there in the desert, in the place where their story had begun, sealing their love once more. "You remember what you said to me that night under the stars?" Fletcher asked, his forehead resting against hers. "When we were transporting Greer back to Deeming, I said a lot of things. You said your father believed that sometimes you meet someone and just know they are important, even if you cannot explain why." Fiona smiled. "I remember. I knew it about you. From that first moment, even with a gun pointed at my head, I knew you were going to change my life. I did not know how, did not know it would be this wonderful, but I knew." "I knew it too," Fiona admitted. "It terrified me. Here I was, grieving my father, hunting his killer, and all I could think about was this stranger with kind eyes who looked at me like I was not broken." "You were never broken. Hurt, yes. Lost, maybe, but never broken." They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the desert silence, surrounded by the vast beauty of the land that had brought them together. Eventually, they mounted their horses and rode back home, to the life they had built, to the family that waited for them, to the future that stretched out before them full of promise and love. When Fletcher turned 65, he finally agreed to fully retire from the ranch work, leaving it in Thomas's capable hands. He and Fiona sold their share of the operation to their son, keeping only the house and a small portion of land for themselves. It was time, they both agreed, to slow down and enjoy the life they had earned. They traveled some, visiting Catherine and her family, taking a trip to San Francisco that left them both wide-eyed at how much the world was changing. But they always came back to Deeming, to their little house and their piece of desert, because it was home in a way nowhere else could be. Fiona's health began to decline when she was 68, her body finally giving in to decades of hard living and harder work. Fletcher cared for her with the same devotion he had shown throughout their marriage, helping her with daily tasks, reading to her in the evenings, holding her hand through the bad days. "I am sorry," she said one particularly difficult afternoon, frustrated by her own weakness. "For what?" "For getting old, for not being the strong woman you married." Fletcher looked at her in disbelief. "Fiona Xavier, you are the strongest person I have ever known. Your body might be getting tired, but your spirit is as fierce as it was the day you pointed that rifle at me in the desert. You have nothing to apologize for. I worry about you, about what will happen when I am gone. You are not going anywhere for a long time yet. We still have years together." Fletcher kissed her forehead gently. "And when that time does come, whenever it comes, I will be okay because you loved me. Because we had this beautiful life together. That is enough, Fiona. That is more than enough." But despite his hopeful words, Fletcher knew the truth. He could see it in the way Fiona grew weaker each day, in the way she slept more and ate less. He called their children home, and they gathered around her bed. This woman who had been so strong and independent, now fragile in a way that broke all their hearts. "Tell them the story," Fiona whispered to Fletcher one evening. Their children and grandchildren sat around the room, quiet and attentive. "Tell them how we met." So Fletcher did. He told them about his horse going lame, about walking through the desert until he thought he would die, about stumbling upon the stagecoach and thinking his luck had run out. He told them about Fiona tracking him down, about the gunshots and the accusations, about passing out from dehydration and waking to her giving him water. He told them about hunting Silas Greer, about stopping Fiona from making a choice she would have regretted, about falling in love under the desert stars. He told them about coming back to Deeming, about deciding to stay, about the best decision he ever made being to build a life with the fierce woman who had spared his life, when she had every reason not to. "Your mother saved me in every way a person can be saved," Fletcher said, his voice thick with emotion. "She gave me a home, a family, a purpose. She taught me that love is not just a feeling, it is a choice you make every single day. And I have chosen her every day for 45 years, and I would make that choice 1,000,000 times over." Fiona squeezed his hand weakly, smiling through her tears. "And I chose you, the cowboy in the desert who looked at me with such honest eyes. You were the one I had been searching for, even though I did not know I was searching." She passed away peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by her family, her hand in Fletcher's. The entire town turned out for her funeral, testament to the life she had lived and the people she had touched. They buried her on a hill overlooking their ranch, with a view of the desert that had been such a defining part of their story. Fletcher grieved as anyone would after losing their soulmate, but he did not break. Fiona had made him too strong for that, had loved him too well. He spent his days working in the garden she had planted, playing with his grandchildren, and sitting on the porch in the evenings, talking to her as if she were still there beside him. Thomas worried about him, suggested he move into town, closer to family, but Fletcher refused. "This is our home," he said simply. "Mine and your mother's. I am not leaving it." He lived 5 more years after Fiona's passing, years filled with family and memories and the quiet contentment of a life well lived. His grandchildren grew, and some of them married, giving him great-grandchildren who would never remember him but would hear stories about him and the woman he loved. On a warm spring evening, the kind that made the desert bloom with wildflowers, Fletcher sat on his porch watching the sunset. He was 85 years old, his body tired but his mind still sharp. He thought about Fiona, about their life together, about how lucky he had been to find her in that vast wasteland all those years ago. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Fletcher closed his eyes and smiled. He could almost feel Fiona beside him, her hand in his, her voice whispering in his ear. "Come on, cowboy," she seemed to say. "Time to come home." Fletcher Xavier passed peacefully in his sleep that night, and they buried him next to Fiona on the hill overlooking the ranch. The marker was simple. Fletcher Xavier, 1860–1945, beloved husband, father, grandfather, he found love in the desert and built a life worth living beside it. Fiona's marker read, Fiona Kirby Xavier, 1862. 1940, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she gave water to a stranger and found her soulmate. Their story became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The tale of the outlaw hunter and the dying cowboy, of mercy shown and love found, of 2 people who saved each other in all the ways that mattered. Their descendants continued to work the land they had claimed, to honor the legacy of strength and love they had left behind. The ranch prospered for generations, becoming one of the most respected horse breeding operations in New Mexico. Each new owner added their own chapter to the story, but the foundation remained the same. The love between Fletcher and Fiona Xavier, a love that had started with a canteen of water in the desert and had grown to encompass an entire family, an entire legacy. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the desert wind blew just right, people swore they could see two figures sitting on the hill where Fletcher and Fiona were buried, holding hands and watching the sunset together, their love transcending even death itself. It was a good story, a true story, a love story for the ages. Not because it was dramatic or filled with grand gestures, but because it was real. Two people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who chose each other every day after that, who built something beautiful and lasting from the harsh reality of life in the Wild West. Their great-grandson eventually wrote a book about them, based on family stories and old letters he found in the attic of the original ranch house. It became a modest bestseller, touching hearts across the country with its message of love, redemption, and second chances. The old yellow house on Cedar Street in Deeming, where Fiona had lived when she met Fletcher, was eventually turned into a small museum, dedicated to preserving the history of the territory and the remarkable people who had shaped it. Among the exhibits was the canteen Fiona had used to give Fletcher water, preserved behind glass with a plaque that read, "Where Love Began." Tourists would come from all over to see it, to hear the story of the outlaw hunter and the cowboy, to stand in the place where two people had fallen in love against all odds. They would visit the ranch, now a working museum itself, and see the life Fletcher and Fiona had built with their own hands. But for those who truly understood, who had experienced their own desert moments of desperation and salvation, the story meant something more. It meant that love could be found in the most unlikely places, that mercy was stronger than vengeance. That one choice, one moment of compassion, could change everything. It meant that sometimes, when you think your luck has run out, when you are dying of thirst in the desert of life, someone might come along and offer you water. And if you are very lucky, very blessed, that someone might turn out to be the person you have been searching for your entire life, even if you did not know you were searching. Fletcher and Fiona's story was not just their own. It belonged to everyone who believed in the transformative power of love, in the possibility of second chances, in the idea that even in the harshest landscapes, the most beautiful flowers can bloom. Their love had started with a simple act of kindness in the unforgiving Arizona desert. It had survived grief and hardship, had flourished despite the odds, had created a legacy that would outlast them by generations. And in the end, it proved what Fletcher had whispered to Fiona on that first evening they spent together. Sometimes you just know. You know when you have found the one who will change everything, who will save you in all the ways that matter, who will make all the wandering and searching finally make sense. You know when you have found home, not in a place but in a person. Fletcher knew it when a fierce woman gave him water in the desert. Fiona knew it when an honest cowboy stopped her from destroying herself with vengeance. And together, they built a love that proved stronger than death itself, a love that would inspire generations, a love that showed the world what it meant to truly find your soulmate in the vast wilderness of life. Their story ended the way all good love stories should, with a life fully lived, a family deeply loved, and the absolute certainty that they had found in each other everything they had ever needed. Fletcher had been searching for a home. Fiona had been searching for healing. Together, they found both and so much more in the end. The outlaw hunter had spared the cowboy's life not once but twice. First with a canteen of water in the desert, and then by giving him a reason to live that went beyond mere survival. And the cowboy had returned the favor, saving her from the darkness that threatened to consume her, showing her that love was stronger than grief, that mercy was braver than revenge. They had found each other in the wasteland, and created an oasis that would shelter generations. That was their legacy. That was their gift to the world. That was the story of Fletcher and Fiona Xavier, two souls who were meant to find each other, who did find each other, and who spent the rest of their lives grateful for the day their paths crossed in the middle of the unforgiving desert. And in every retelling, in every heart that heard their story and found hope in it, their love lived on, eternal as the desert itself, beautiful as the sunrise over the New Mexico plains, true as the stars that had witnessed their first declarations of love all those years ago. Their story was complete, perfect in its imperfection, happy in its hard-won joy, a testament to the power of love to transform two lives into one beautiful, unified whole.